What up, YouTube? You know your boy back with some more true fact. And today's report I want to bring to you is that the government is actually going to be using food warfare as a tactic to bring it down the economy. Yes, and it is food shortages going on all across the globe everywhere. It's because the governments are working together to bring in the new world order. So they're striking out. So all these events are striking out globally because of the government is actually causing it. Which brings me right here into my first report on the International Policy Digest, using food as a weapon of war. In recent days, the head of the United Nations World Food Program (WFP), David Beasley, in an interview with the Associated Press, said that if the world wants to eradicate world hunger, then the international community needs to explore ways to end the fact that 19 countries are currently engaged in a protracted conflict, plaguing nations from the continent of Africa to the Middle East. The downside of these conflicts is that they drain approximately 80% of the WFP fund, as the UN Global Food Agency must provide the necessary resources for civilians trapped in those of war. Moreover, Mr. Beasley asserted that finding solutions to conflict would allow funding to be diverted to necessary global infrastructure projects, stimulating economic growth in many developing countries. Further, reaching Sustainable Development Goal number 2 is unattainable if conflict persists. Zero hunger by 2030, which goes on right along with the UN agenda, the 2030 agenda. The number of people globally facing extreme hunger rose last year from 777 million to 815 million. The increase is directly attributed to ongoing conflicts, Beasley stated, that it is a disgrace on humanity, the number of innocent victims of conflict, children that are starving to death because of nothing but man-made conflict. The UN Food Agency head was also interviewed by 60 Minutes for a segment titled Catastrophic. The piece examined how the Yemeni civil war threatens 7 million people and has brought them to the brink of starvation. Saudi Arabia Saudi Arabia's blockage of Yemen further accelerates the tensions in the region. The blockage was instituted following an attack by Shiite Houthi rebels backed by Iran. The global pressure upon Saudi Arabia to confine the blockage to rebel-held areas has done little to alleviate the plight of the Yemeni civilian population. In addition, news from this conflict is scarce due to Saudi's ban on journalists entering the area. The 60 Minutes crew was unable to capture the horrible images of estimated children who have become the silent victim in the civil war. Mr. Beales indicated that if the required financial resources are not received soon, the result will surely be an outbreak of famine, where he estimated that 125,000 little girls and boys will die. The Saudis do not want the world to view this horrifying image, and the humanitarian crisis, mainly wrought by the Saudi-led coalition, has seen the death of some 3,000 civilians. And the Arab community is working with the European people. They all working together to cause these crises all around the world. The governments all around the world are working together and join up the New World Order. Continuing in the article, the use of food as a weapon of war is deplorable, but unfortunately it is an all too common tactic utilized by parties to a conflict. The blocking of relief supplies is a violation of international humanitarian law, the law of armed conflict. The legal basis for this can be found in additional Protocol 1 API to the 1949 Geneva Convention. Further exacerbating an already dire situation in Yemen, it is cholera epidemic. The lack of proper sanitation and water treatment facilities have caused this health emergency, the greatest obstacle facing aid workers in gaining access to those in need. The mission of the WFP is to provide food assistance to vulnerable population. Its largest contributor, the United States, allows for the UN Food Agency to feed 90 million people in more than 73 countries. The food insecurity conflict nexus presents significant challenge to the WFP. Estimates indicate that 2 billion people in 2016 were residing in states afflicted by conflict and violence. Fragile states create national security concerns. Moreover, the number of internationally displaced persons (IDPs) has grown exponentially due to the ongoing conflicts. Conflict and food security threatens entire generation of young people. It is incumbent upon the international community to develop ways to locate the root causes of these conflicts for the most innocent among us, our children, which they are causing the problem of globally. Globally, they are doing this, starving people. Here at the CBC News here in Cuba, and it states Cuba starts widespread rationing of food and other basics because they're starving over there. So now they have to rationalize their meals. And it's only getting worse. And it's the Cuban government announced Friday that it's launching widespread rationing of chicken, eggs, rice, beans, soap, and other basic products in the face of a grave economic crisis. Commerce Minister Bestie Diaz Valquez told the state-run Cuban news agency that various forms of rationing would be employed in order to deal with shortages of the staple foods. She blamed the hardening of the U.S. trade embargo by the Trump administration, who is causing all these shortages due to the tariffs that he's putting on the country. Tariff is war. Tariff is basically war. When you tariff on the country, you basically starting a war because it is hurting them. And it can't hurt them. Moving right over to Business Wire, you have 1 in 5 Canadians have skipped a meal because they couldn't afford to buy anything. Other results right here. Canadian people are reaping the consequences of starvation. And it said it's hard to swallow the fact that majority, 64% of the 1 million monthly Canadian food bank users are individual living on their own, or a single parent supporting a family alone. It is It is commitment to help tackle food insecurity. Cataly Pasta has lunch giving feels good, commissioning a survey to take a plus on food bank user perceptions and the struggle for single adults. It is getting tough in these countries where all these governments are together, draining the food out of the people. You also have here the Moscow Times. As Russia's food prices soar, bakers are feeling the squeeze. The cost of key ingredients like sugar and eggs have risen sharply in recent months. The cost of key ingredients like sugar and eggs grew by around 28 to 26% respectively last year, while grains and flour rose approximately 7 to 20%. In the first 2 weeks of 2019, inflation jumped beyond the central bank's expectation, with the price of flour growing by 2.6% and prices overall increasing by nearly 1%. The Business Daily reported. Economists say that a poor harvest and rising oil prices leading to higher transport costs and devalued ruble due to sanctions are at the root cause of the problem. Sanctions are at the root cause of the problem, which is honored by the best United States, which it is coming here. It is coming here. So don't think they doing it to other countries. It ain't coming here. They just saving the best for last. And you have here on the South China Morning Post, 10 million North Korea face food shortages after worst harvest, says United Nations. The UN found North Korea protein intake to be very low, with some families consuming protein only a few times a year. It's crazy. North Korea has cut food ration to 300 grams a day, less than 11 ounces, the lowest ever for this time of year, and further cuts are likely after the worst harvest in a decade. The United Nations said on Friday the UN carried out a full assessment at the request of North Korea from March 29th to April 12th. It was granted wide access, including to cooperative farms, rural and urban household nurseries, and food distribution centers. This new food security assessment have found that following the worst harvest in 10 years due to dry spills, heat waves, and flooding, 10 million people suffer from severe food insecurity due to spills, heat waves, and flooding, which the United States had a capability of water warfare, which they've been doing since the early 1800s. They've been using weather warfare. Yes, it is true. And moving right along, you got Zero Head. The U.S. faces a catastrophic food supply crisis in America as farmers struggle. American farmers are battling several issues when it comes to producing our food. Regulated low prices, tariffs, and the ability to export have all cut into the salaries of farmers. They are officially in crisis mode, just like the United States food supply. So it is coming here. It's just building up over the years. So that in the near future it will be felt. Average farm income has fallen to near 15 years low under President Donald Trump policies, and in some areas of the country, farm bankruptcies are soaring. And with slightly higher interest rates, many don't see borrowing more money as an option. A lot of farmers are going to give the president the benefit of the doubt and have to date. Excuse me. But the longer the trade war goes on, the more that the dynamic changes, said Bryan, executive director of Farmers and Free Trade. With no end to this disastrous trade war in sight, many farmers have traveled to Washington to share their plight with their president himself, hoping that he'll end a trade war that's already precarious food crisis. Farmers make up a fairly large chunk of President Trump's base, and their unwillingness to put food production in the United States first could be detrimental for Trump's re-election chances in 2020. It could also be the beginning of a catastrophic food shortage, which is exactly where it's leading into. Which is exactly where it's leading into. And here you have supermarket news. Here on supermarket news, and it states retail food prices projected to rise. Food at home CPI growth still historically low, USDA says. Food prices are on their way up at the grocery stores this year, according to projections by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The USDA Economic Research Service forecasts the food at home consumers price index (CPI) to rise 1% to 2% in 2019, though that's higher than the 0 to 1% uptick estimated for 2018. The increase expected for 2019 would mark the fourth straight year of deflating or lower than average inflating retail food prices. The agency noted in its Food Price Outlook 2008 through 2019 report, the gain also would be less than the 20-year historical average of 2.1%. Product categories likely to see price increases this year include dairy products by 3% to 4%, fresh vegetables by 2.5 to 3.5%, fresh fruit from 2% to 3%, cereal and bakery products from 2% to 3%, beef and veal 1% to 2%, poultry 1 to 2%, fish and seafood 0.25 to 1.25%, and sugar and sweets 0 to 1%. The expected rise in dairy prices for 2019 comes after a flat 1% decrease estimated for 2018 according to the USDA. Milk production is expected to rise at a modest rate of 1.1% in 2008. Dairy exports have strengthened but are expected to be eliminated for the rest of the year due to recent tariffs imposed by Mexico and China. The report said domestic demand for the most dairy products has been relatively weak in the first half of the year, but is expected to recover in the second half. Egg prices among most volatile retail food prices due to changes in seasonal demand are projected to inch up 1% or less in 2019 following an estimated 10% to 11 jump in 2008. The USDA said recent price hikes at the farm and wholesale level indicate that retail egg prices could continue to rise over the next few months. That contrasts with 2017 when more eggs laying birds and a higher number of eggs per hen ease price. Food categories that may experience retail price decrease include fats and oils, 3% to 2 pork, 75 to 25% other meat, 25 to 75% processed fruit and vegetables, 1% on non-alcoholic beverages, and 25 to 75%. In addition to commodify pricing prices for other factors of production may influence retail food prices in 2019. The USDA said in the report electricity and diesel costs, as well as many other costs associated with food production, transport, and retail sales are expected to rise, placing upward pressure on prices. Meanwhile, the USDA expects food away from home prices, food purchased at restaurants to grow at a constant rate this year, rising from 2 to 3%, the same increase estimated for 2018. And when it comes, it's going to come hard. It's really going to come hard. So not only that you having food shortages, you have the countries that's actually blocking off aid to go into other countries as a form of food warfare, which is crazy. Which brings me over here to Retours.com. After Venezuelan troops block aid, Maduro faces diplomatic siege. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro faced growing regional pressure on Sunday after his troops repelled foreign aid convoys, with the United States threatening new sanctions and Brazil urging allies to join a liberation effort because they are starving to death over there. Violent clashes with security forces over the opposition U.S.-backed attempt on Saturday to bring aid to the economically devastated country left almost 300 wounded and at least three protesters dead near the Brazilian border, just because they're trying to eat and survive. You're knocking them off. Not only that, they already starving, you're killing them too. Killing them, but before they can even starve to death, at least let them starve to death. Don't just kill them. Something. If you ain't gonna let the food in for them, it's crazy what they're doing. And then you also have here on the strange sound, weather crusade, dozens fear dead after devastating flash flood hit Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran. Heavy rains have caused flash flooding and landslides in area of Iran, Pakistan, and Afghanistan over the last few days. Parts of Kandahar province in Afghanistan recorded around half of its annual rainfall in 30 hours. Parts of Pakistan have also been affected by severe snowstorms. According to media reports, as many as 50 people have died as a result of flooding, landslides, or collapsing buildings across from 3 countries. And as you can see here in the picture, weather warfare deadly floods hit Afghanistan, Iran, and Pakistan beginning on March 2019. Because the U.S. have the power of controlling the weather. They are the climate changers through HAARP, through the technology of HAARP. They are controlling the weather and they're using it as weather warfare on other countries. This is going on. It is for real. Which leads me to The Guardian. You have at least 62 people killed in Iran flood as U.S. accused of blocking aid. The death toll from 2 weeks of flooding in Iran has risen to 62, and frustration mounts inside the country as the government's handling of the crisis and international dispute has broken out over whether renewed U.S. sanctions are blocking aid. Iran's Foreign Minister Javad and the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo have been engaged in a war of words over the crisis. Zarif attacked the U.S. for economic terrorism and said it was blocking the shipment of vital rescue equipment. Donald Trump maximum pressure is impending aid effort on the Iranian Red Crescent to all communities devastated by unprecedented flood. Block equipment include relief choppers, he said on Twitter. He also attacked European countries for hesitating to help over fears of violating sanctions. Europe, this is crazy what they got going on. And then other people can't even help because of the sanctions that's imposed on them. This is crazy. Pompeo responded with an attack on Iranian government failing. These floods once again show the level of Iranian regime mismanagement in urban planning and in emergency preparedness. The same thing that sounds familiar over here with the DHS saying that all Americans need to prepare for 6 months without food, electric, gas, and all of that stuff, just to test to see if we are prepared to go through such a thing because we have never have. And that's on the UN report of the 2030 plan. He said in a statement that offered condolence and made an offer of aid, but with no details. Inside Iran, the crisis has exposed tension between the reformist President Hussein and his hardline opponent, including the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC), with the two camps launching public attacks on each other over management of the floods and their aftermath. The disaster has also fueled public anger, particularly in areas where rescue and aid service have often been slow to arrive. In one possible attempt to dampen protests, the governor of the Northern Province was fired for failing to return home from abroad to manage the crisis. That's crazy. And not only that, you had you had Iran since 2012 saying that you know the U.S. is using weather warfare, that they are capable of using weather warfare on their own country and other regimes as well. Which brings me right to Geoengineering Watch, and it states Iran accuses U.S. of using weather weapons. The head of Iran, the head of Iran's Culture, Heritage, and Tourism Organization believes that in addition to economic sanctions, the West is launching another kind of soft war on the Islamic Republic. Speaking at a ceremony to induce the nation's new meteorologist department, Chief Hassan said that he was suspicious about the drought in the southern part of the country. Now, this was back in July 26, 2012. Speaking at a ceremony to introduce the nation's new, he went on to accuse the West of using technology to influence the nation's climate, saying sandstorms, drought, and other extreme weather were the result of an unspecified method of war. Speaking at a ceremony to introduce the nation's new chief of meteorology department, Hassan said that he was suspicious about the drought in the southern part of the country, the word ignorance and colonist term used by Iranian authorities to label the West. are influence Iran climate conditions using technology. Mr. Mavsky was quoted as saying by the Fars news agency, according to the AFP, the drought is an accurate issue and soft war is completely evident. The levels of drought is not normal. Iran's southern region has been hit by sandstorms that engulf several cities caused by numerous droughts. The storms typically enter Iran from neighboring Iraq, where wars have increased the desertification of the country. He went on to accuse the West as using technology to influence the nation's climate, saying sandstorms, drought, and other extreme weather were the result of an unspecified method of war. And this is what the Iran officials were saying. According to the report on climate, whose accuracy was being verified, European countries are using special equipment to force clouds to dump water on their own continents. Continents. They use it on their own people, like America using it on their own people. It's population control. That's all it is. It's control of the masses. He continued, they prevent rain clouds from reaching regional countries, including Iran. Iran lead Iran leaders continually accuse the West and specifically the United States of threatening against the Islamic Republic's sovereignty and development. The Pentagon has admitted utilizing weather warfare against adversaries. In 2005, the Air Force said it has the ability to generate pre-perception fog and storms on Earth or to modify space weather, and that the production of the artificial weather all are a part of an integrated set of technologies. In addition, the U.S. military has induced atmospheric modification using the High Frequency Active Aerial Research Program, or known as HARP. The HARP system is fully operational and in many regards DARP's existing conventional and strategic weapon system. While there is no firm evidence of these used for military purposes, Air Force documents suggest HARP is an integral part of the militarization of space. The Economist report in December 2007. According to a former novel physician, Ben Livingston, the Pentagon has used weather warfare techniques since at the least the Vietnam War. Livingston asserted that hurricane control was a national priority of the government in the 60s, and they had the ability to do it at that time. That was 40 years ago, Paul Joseph Watson wrote in 2005 after Livingston appeared on Alex Jones' show. In April of 1997, United States Secretary of Defense William C. Cohen said governments are engaging in an eco-type of terrorism whereby they can alter the climate, set off earthquakes, volcanoes remotely through the use of electromagnetic waves. Cohen made the comment in 1997 at a conference of terrorism, weapons of mass destruction, and U.S. Strategy in his official capability as the U.S. Secretary of Defense. The United States and Israel have engaged in covert war against Iran over the last several years, so the idea that weather weapons are being used in the ongoing effort is hardly far-fetched, because it is for real. They're doing it like it ain't nothing. And people don't think that they actually can um um control Mother Nature is happening. God is allowing them to do it because God is using it for his purpose. So God is allowing them to use weather modification because God is going to turn it around and use it for His purpose. Because everything that's done on the earth is done for a reason, and it's done, and anything that's done is done through Him. He gives the okay, or He allows it to happen in order for it to be done. It's always a reason to it, and it's from the Most High. And it's from the Most High. Now you have. Now we're going at it with the nuclear weapons with Russia, Iran, and China. Knowing that America nuclear cannot withhold all of them. They're too big, especially with China alone. Especially with China alone. And here on Newsweek.com you have EU politicians break into airbase holding American nuclear bomb to protest weapons stockpiling there. It's crazy because Russia already said if you're gonna be stockpiling on my border, I'm gonna bring it to you. Putin already made that known. If you're gonna be stockpiling weapons over here, I'm gonna come closer by you and stop and place my missiles there, which they are from the front and the back of the U.S., which I'm gonna show you in just a moment. Okay, and it says 3 European lawmakers were arrested after they broke into an airbase in Beijing to protest the stockpiling of American nuclear weapons there. The three politicians, Molly Scott and the UK Michael of France and Tilly Messers of Luxembourg, all members of the European Parliament MEPs representing Green Party, broke into the Caroline Brugge base in the eastern Belgium on Wednesday and unfurled a banner on a runway used by F-16 fighter jets, the Guardian reported. The three had been protesting the base stockpiling of American B-61 nuclear bombs, of which there were believed to be between 10 and 20 at the facility, according to the nuclear threat. So it's for sure that the U.S. is stockpiling nuclear missiles on the Russian border. And here on the Sun, you have Russia has secretly installed nuke missiles in Venezuela. U.S. politician claim in chilling echo of Cuban Missile Crisis. So he's saying, okay, don't forget about the Cuban Missile Crisis back then. It's still on the table, messing around, putting nuclear weapons over there in Europe. Because Russia, Putin is not playing. In this state, Russia has secretly installed nuclear missiles in Venezuela. A U.S. politician has sanctionarily claimed in a chilling echo of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Republican Congress Mario Diaz-Balart said he believes Vladimir Putin's hidden nukes are now a direct threat to the national security of the United States. He made his astonishing allegation hours after Venezuela was pushed to the brink of civil war when opposition leader Juan Guaido called for rival Nicolas Maduro to be ousted from office. Diaz-Balart told Fox News if Maduro stays in power, it could be an open door for the Russians and the Chinese and for others to increase their activity against our national security interests. So they're setting up right in our backyard. Right in our backyard. Putin Putin's very open support of President Maduro has long been compared to the 1962 crisis sparked by the installation of nuclear-armed Soviet missiles on Cuba, which Putin is putting missiles in Cuba right now. Diaz-Berla claims also come after Russia landed two nuclear bombers in Venezuela in a show of defiance to Donald Trump. The Tu-160 Russian bombers landed in Kharkiv in December as Putin publicly paraded his support of the socialist president. The Kremlin has billions at stake after it sank a fortune into loan propping up Maduro's money. It stands to lose if he is ever ousted from power. Putin has already handed Venezuelans more than $13 billion in credit underwritten by its huge oil reserve, reported the largest in the world. So you see why Russia is standing by it, because they have so much invested on Venezuela oil, which is makes up for all the oil that the Russians generate in their country. They get it for Venezuela. That's why they're backing Venezuela up heavy. Maduro military is also said to owe the Kremlin $8 billion for tanks, missile defense systems, and fighter jets it has purchased in recent years. Any repayment will almost certainly be a loss to Guaido if Guaido take power. With all future army orders like going straight to the Pentagon, Venezuela's military bases, airfields, and ports are also seen as an ideal staging post for Russian forces in the region. Michael Wiguel of the Finnish Institute of International Affairs told RFE/RF establishing close relations with Venezuela give Moscow a certain nuisance power in relations to the United States, and that can be used as a bargaining chip in future dealings with the United States. It also can be kind of a showcase for Russia's aspiration to be considered global power. So not only that, it put them right at our backyard. By them being close associated with Venezuela, it puts them right in America's backyard. And Russia has missiles capable of reaching anywhere. China do too. And that's something that we do not want to happen. That is something we do not want to happen. And you have here another report on the Sun.co. You got Russian warns buildup of U.S. weapons near its border, risk repeat of Cuban Missile Crisis as Moscow warship docks in Havana. Russian have shipped in to Havana in Cuba. They're shipping in missile tanks in Cuba. So now that is what I mean by they're at the front of us and they're behind us. They're coming in from both sides, front and back. And where we gonna go? They coming from the front, the back, and they block. And Trump got the other side blocked off with the wall. Where you gonna go swimming if they come to invade? Cause that's the only way to go out to the east to the ocean. If they coming in from the front of them and the back, it's gonna get real ugly if you're not prepared for it. And it's that Russia has warned the U.S. its buildup of weapons in Europe risks a repeat of Cuban Missile Crisis as a Moscow warship docked near Havana yesterday. And this report was put out on June 25th, 2019. Russia Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Rabin said on Monday that U.S. plans to deploy missile systems near the Russian border risk a nuclear standoff, a par with the height of Cold War. The Cuban Missile Crisis erupted in 1962 when the Soviet Union responded to a U.S. missile deployment in Turkey by sending ballistic missiles to Cuba, just miles from the U.S. coastline. It sparked a tense two-week standoff that brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. And they state, we could find ourselves in a situation where we have a rocket crisis close not just to the crisis of the 1980s, but close to the Caribbean crisis. Russia has also been fiercely critical of President Trump's recent withdrawals from the INF Armed Control Treaty. If things get as far as an actual deployment on the ground of these sorts of systems, the situation won't just get more complicated, it will escalate right to the limit. We could find ourselves in a situation where we have a rocket crisis close not just to the crisis of the 1980s, but close to the Caribbean crisis, the Russia's term for the 1962 Cuban standoff. And they are not playing. And you see, he's pulled up right here, right up there in Havana, in Cuba. While Trump is keeping everybody blindsided, but war is at the brink. They ain't Trump ain't putting all those military and bombers and all them men's over there in the Middle East for nothing, and Trump and Putin in China and Iran ain't putting all these deployments in Venezuela for nothing and in Cuba for nothing. It's gonna get very, very ugly, very ugly. But all of it is a plot for all of the worldwide governments to bring in the new world order. That's why this whole thing come out, because it's tragedy happening all over. They're all working together. Putin, China, North Korea, U.S. They all working together. They are all working together, causing this worldwide crisis to bring in the new world order. And and you have here, you have here, you have here the roll call, and that and it read, GOP representative says Russia has nuclear weapons in Venezuela, but offer no evidence. And it read, In a Tuesday segment on Fox News, hosted Tucker Carlson pressed Diaz Baller on whether he thought the Chinese, Russians, and Iranian military personnel present in South America meant those countries might eventually invade the U.S. Diaz, Diaz demurred but invoked the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, where the U.S. President John F. Kennedy and Soviet Union leader Nikita Khrushchev pushed each other to the brink of nuclear war. The United States and the closest we ever came to nuclear war was because the Russians put missiles right, the nuclear and put missiles right in Cuba. Diaz Balart said, "Are you saying the Russians will put nuclear missiles in Venezuela?" Carson asked. If they fall up is a asking a follow up of question. What am I suggesting is that they already are there, Diaz Balart said. The Florida congressman did not provide any evidence or support that suggestion, but I will. What am I suggesting that there are the Russian military flew and landed a nuclear-capable bomb in Venezuela in 2008, but there have been no reports or claims that they have outfitted such aircraft with nuclear bombs or transported nuclear missiles to the country. Guaido and his supporters have accused longtime Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro, who has been president since 2003, of stealing the 2019 presidential election through fraudulent means. In March, the Trump slapped new economic sanctions on Maduro's government in retaliation for Maduro starving his people via a smash and grab operation, the White House announced. Trump administration officials have painted a dismissive picture of corruption and intimidation in Venezuela, saying Maduro government has been cutting off food aid to neighborhoods, determined be determined to be voting against the strongman president and his political party. In short, Maduro has forced his people to make a decision. You vote for the regime, or you explain to your family why there's no food on the table. Why there's no food on the table. So he's basically telling them, you don't pick me, you ain't gonna eat. You or your family, your kids ain't gonna eat. Ain't gonna eat. And now that's crazy because here on I got a report here on Bloomberg that was put out not too long ago. And this report states Trump warns of epic stock market crash if he's not reelected. This is what I mean. They are all working together. They are all working together. They got the same objective because Trump is saying the same thing too. If you don't pick him, you ain't gonna eat because the stock market crash, a whole bunch of mess goes crashes down with it. That's gonna affect the food and raise hyperinflation. President Donald Trump, gearing up for the official start of his 2020 campaign, warned the U.S. would face an epic stock market crash if he's not reelected. If anyone but me takes over, Trump told his 61 million Twitter followers on Saturday, there will be a market crash like the like of which has not been seen before. If he's not reelected, we're gonna see a stock market crash that we never seen before. So it's gonna be brutal, and it is. So it's best to be prepared for it because it's gonna happen. It is prophesied that it's gonna happen. Destruction to America is coming. It's only at the door, not too far along from coming. And it is going to be devastating once it hits. Very devastating. Which brings me over to the Guardian to show you that Russian military have arrived in Venezuela to discuss training and strategy. Here on the Guardian. So they are already deployed in Venezuela. They already are. And then you also have here, you have here on CNN, Russia confirms its military personnel are in Venezuela. You have here on Heart, Russia confirms its military arrived in Venezuela, every right to be there, and they have every right to be there. And it's the Russian foreign minister Russian foreign minister says that Russian military personnel that arrived in Venezuela over the weekend has every right to be there. U.S. Vice President Pence called Russian activity in Venezuela a provocation on Wednesday. The rivalry between Russia and the United States over how to resolve a crisis in Venezuela widened following the arrival of Russian military personnel to support Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro over the weekend. The United States on Monday accused Russia of reckless escalation of the situation in Venezuela by deploying military planes and personnel to the crisis-stricken South American nation that Washington has hit with crippling sanctions. And that is what we do. We bully people, go and take stuff and cost soldiers' lives. Because I mean, if soldiers actually knew what they was getting into before they become a soldier, I'm pretty sure it would be a different outcome. Because it's not like they tell you, okay, you're getting in here so that we can go steal people resources and go steal other stuff that we need from people because we don't have the money or we create the money, but we just don't want to pay them for it. We just rather take it and take over the whole resources and just do it like that. And kill innocent people, kids, moms, children, dads in the process, which they don't care. They do not care. It's all about power and money. And the destruction is coming to America. So I hope you all prepare, prayed up, because it is coming. Now, that's all I got for you for today. Now, if you like the information that I shared with you today, you already know. Please like, share, and subscribe, and make sure you hit that button and stay tuned in for weekly reports because I'm here weekly giving you more true facts. And I'm out. Stay good until next time.